We are getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
There are some puzzling developments tonight in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie.
The press conferences started happening and the interviews with Nanos. What were you thinking?
Shut your mouth. Stop talking.
63 days since Nancy Guthrie mysteriously vanished from her home in her pajamas without the crucial medication that she needs.
Bitcoin was invented.
Bitcoin. TMZ is saying that it's received a new note demanding 1 Bitcoin, which is about $68,000, in exchange for the name of the individual involved in Guthrie's disappearance.
February 7th, 2025. Studio 1A, Rockefeller Center, New York City. Savannah Guthrie walks onto the set of the Today Show.
Good morning.
She's
Welcome
wearing a
to
yellow
Today
dress.
On this Monday morning.
Bright.
We're so glad you started
Deliberate.
with us.
She sits across from her colleagues and says she's okay. She says the family is holding together. She smiles when it's appropriate.
Welcome
And
to Today
then,
on
almost
this
incidentally, she says something that stops the entire frame. She says that out of all the ransom notes the family received, only 2 of them were legitimate. Sit with that. Not we received a ransom note. Not the kidnappers made a demand. She said only 2 were legitimate. Which means she is aware of how many there were in total. Which means she has a working knowledge of which ones carry weight and which ones don't. That is not the language of a grieving family member kept at arm's length from an investigation. That is the language of someone with access to the interior of a case that law enforcement has not fully disclosed to the public. That one sentence, 8 words, spoken almost casually, is the crack in the foundation of the official narrative. And tonight, we're going to pull on that crack until the whole wall comes down. This is Case Code, Nancy Guthrie. By the time Savannah Guthrie returned to broadcast, the cameras welcomed her back like a reunion. Warm. Hopeful. The cheering beneath her red NBC anchor returns to work amid family crisis. The comments sections filled with prayers and well wishes. The yellow dress read, "I am still standing." But 50 miles from the studio where those cameras rolled, and then 1,000 miles southwest, in the desert heat of Tucson, Arizona, Nancy Guthrie's home sat largely undisturbed. Her medication still on the counter. Her purse still by the door. Her shoes still where she left them. 75 days after she vanished, her case had no arrest. No suspect named publicly. No confirmed sighting. Just a blue Honda CR-V held quietly in an evidence lot, and a family sorting through belongings in a house that may still hold answers. The public sees the yellow dress. What we need to look at is what's underneath it. Let's establish the documented record. Because in any disappearance, there are 2 kinds of evidence, what a machine recorded, and what a person claims to remember. And those 2 things are not equal. 5:32 p.m., January 31st. An Uber record places Nancy Guthrie being transported from a specific location. This is documented. Timestamped. Logged by a platform with GPS accountability. This is an anchor point, verified, cross-referenceable, and not subject to interpretation. 9:50 p.m., January 31st, Tommaso Cian, Nancy's son-in-law, states he drove her home. There is no Uber log for this trip. No toll record. No third-party verification of any kind. What we have is one man's account of where an 84-year-old woman was placed at the end of an evening. One point is documented. The other is a statement. In investigative work, we call this an asymmetrical timeline, and asymmetrical timelines deserve asymmetrical scrutiny. Now mark this. 1:47 a.m., February 1st, security footage captures what appears to be a masked individual in the vicinity of Nancy's property. The footage exists. It is a data point. 2:28 a.m., February 1st. The signal from Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker drops. 41 minutes. That is the window. 41 minutes between a masked figure on camera and the cessation of a medical device signal that had been beating steadily inside the chest of an 84-year-old woman. 41 minutes to move a person. To remove them quietly. To make them disappear from a house that, and this is critical, showed no signs of struggle whatsoever. Pause. And then there is the silence that came before all of this. Nancy was last verified to be at home at 9:50 p.m. The next documented contact with her, the masked figure, doesn't occur until nearly 4 hours later. And no one, in all of that time, picked up a phone to check on her. Not for 14 hours after the expected drop-off. An 84-year-old woman. A pacemaker. A hearing aid. Heart medication that she cannot skip. And the people closest to her did not make a single documented wellness call for 14 hours. Ask yourself this: if your grandmother hadn't confirmed she was home, if she hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't responded, how long before instinct overrides courtesy? How long before you dial the phone? 14 hours is not neglect. 14 hours is an answer waiting to be questioned. Investigators who responded to the Guthrie residence described what they found with a word that should haunt this case. Immaculate. No forced entry. No broken locks. No shattered glass. No overturned furniture. No signs of a physical confrontation of any kind. Her medication was on the counter. The medication she cannot miss. The medication that keeps the rhythm of her heart regulated. Her shoes were by the door. Her purse was in the house. Now, let's apply logic rather than emotion. If this were a robbery, the purse would be gone. If this were a stranger abduction, there would be signs of trauma, resistance, noise, disruption. An 84-year-old woman doesn't simply comply without friction unless one of two things is true: she knows the person asking her to leave, or she has no opportunity to resist. Both of those answers point inward. The left-behind medication is the most damning detail of all. People who flee, people who are frightened and escaping, take their medicine. Even in panic, the body knows what it needs. But people who are removed don't get to choose what comes with them. This was not a kidnapping born of desperation. This was a controlled removal. And controlled removals require two things: someone who planned it and someone who executed it. In structured criminal analysis, complex disappearances, particularly those involving elderly, high-profile, or high-value targets, tend to feature a division of roles. The architect is someone with proximity. Someone who knows the routines. Who knows when the house is occupied, when it isn't, when the cameras are active, and, critically, when they can be disabled. The architect doesn't need to be physically present during the event. The architect's contribution is knowledge. Access. A blueprint. The operative is someone with a specific skill set. Quiet entry. Movement without trace. A history, formal or informal, of access to properties without invitation. Now look at what the physical evidence tells us about February 1st. The cameras at Nancy's residence were disabled. Not malfunctioning, disabled, reportedly through the use of signal disruptors. That is not an improvised act. That requires equipment, preparation, and foreknowledge of the camera system's specifications. Doors were found propped, reportedly with patio containers from the property itself. Objects already present at the location. Used to maintain access. This is familiarity with the property. This is not a stranger who drove past a house and made a decision. This is someone who has been inside that space before. Who knows which containers are near which doors. Who knows the camera range. Who knows the layout. The architect drew the map. The operative walked it. The ransom narrative was always the weakest thread in this case. And yet it became the loudest one. 1 Bitcoin. Sent as a demand to a personal phone number. Not routed through a secure channel. Not anonymized through layers of communication. Sent to a phone. Here's the problem with that. If your goal is money, you target liquidity. You target accounts. You target someone who can move funds quickly and quietly. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old, hard of hearing, and has a pacemaker. She is not a liquid financial target. She is a vulnerable person with a famous sister. So ask the next question, why is Savannah Guthrie the implicit audience of the demand? And then, according to what has been reported, one of the ransom notes contained something that no genuine kidnapper writes. An apology. Kidnappers who are motivated by money do not apologize. They threaten. They deadline. They escalate. An apology in a ransom note is not the language of criminal transaction. It is the language of someone who knows the family. Someone who feels guilt. Someone who wanted the note to communicate something beyond the demand itself. And then there is Savannah's on-air disclosure that only 2 of the notes were legitimate. If you are a stranger who has taken someone for ransom, you send 1 note. Maybe 2. You don't send a volume of notes, some of which can be categorized as not legitimate. That categorization implies a filtering process, a process that someone close to the investigation was privy to. The ransom was not the motive. The ransom was the misdirection. It was placed on top of the evidence like a lens, designed to focus attention outward, toward strangers, toward anonymous Bitcoin wallets, toward the idea of organized crime or opportunistic predation. But the evidence beneath it points in the opposite direction. Every controlled disappearance has a network. People don't vanish in a vacuum, and operations like this don't execute without a chain of communication, logistics, and complicity. Tucson is a city with a specific social geography. It has a music scene. It has a community of interconnected social circles. It has, like every city, a subset of individuals with criminal histories of quiet entry, property access, and movement without detection. The last known contact with Nancy Guthrie traces back through an evening that ended with one man's account of a car ride. Tomas Ocayan. Son-in-law. The last person to see her. That does not make him guilty. But it does make him the logical origin point of any investigative radius. Because proximity plus opportunity plus routine knowledge is the formula that produced the physical evidence we've already examined. The question investigators should be mapping is not who could have done this, but who already had the access to do this without doing anything unusual. Because whoever removed Nancy Guthrie from her home did not appear to be doing anything unusual. There was no struggle. No alarm. No witness who heard a disturbance. It looked, from the outside, like nothing happened at all. That level of seamlessness is not luck. It is familiarity. 75 days. Nancy Guthrie's blue Honda CR-V sits in an evidence lot. Held. Sealed. Being processed by investigators who have not publicly disclosed what they found inside it, or what they're still looking for. That car is a witness. Metal and fiber and residue don't have reasons to lie. Whatever that car holds, the people running this investigation believe it matters enough to retain. And yet, while that car sits in evidence, belongings have reportedly been removed from Nancy Guthrie's home. Personal effects. Items from a space that is still, technically, an active part of an open investigation. That detail should stop you cold. You don't move belongings from the home of a missing person while the case is active. Not unless someone has decided, for reasons of their own, that the investigation's gaze has moved elsewhere. Or that it won't return. But here's where we land tonight. The evidence is inward. Every piece of it, the disabled cameras, the prop doors, the immaculate house, the left-behind medication, the unverified timeline, the 14-hour silence, the apology in a ransom note. Every piece of it points toward someone who knew Nancy Guthrie, knew her home, and knew what they were doing when they walked through that door at 1:47 in the morning. The ransom sent attention outward. The evidence keeps dragging it back. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She has a pacemaker. She needs medication she did not take with her. She is hearing impaired and alone, wherever she is. If she is alive, every hour matters. If she is not, every day that passes without accountability is a day that someone who planned this gets to live normally. Savannah Guthrie went back to work in a yellow dress and smiled at the camera. And somewhere, the people responsible for her mother's disappearance watched that broadcast too. They watched it. And felt nothing. Or worse, felt relief. The official narrative says this is a kidnapping. A ransom case. An act by strangers motivated by money. We say, look inward. Look at who knew the house. Who knew the routines? Who was the last to see her? Who didn't call for 14 hours? Who knows which ransom notes were real? Who moved the belongings? The answer to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance does not live in the story being told publicly. It lives in the space between what people say happened and what the evidence says cannot be true. Find that space. That's where she is.